called me up to say hello. Well, I was hoping that you would say you're moving to a whole new life, and I just smile and say that's good. But I still think about the days when you and I would steal away, and it felt good just to say your name and pretend that you were mine. But we have other promises to keep, other roads to follow, yeah. And I'll hold you while you sleep. But now we have other roads to follow, other promises to keep.
Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you. Hi, everybody. This is Ross Pallone with the Rossaround Backstage podcast. I'm here today in Aspen, Colorado. I'm on the road on the Chris Isaak tour, and I'm here with the keyboard player from that band, Scott Plunkett. Scott and I have known each other for over 30 years.
Yeah.
We started out, I met Scott when Scott was the keyboard player for the Michael McDonald band. And since then, Scott has worked with Stevie Nicks, Don Henley, Scaggs, and currently in the band with Chris Isaak, which you've been in for, I think, over 14 years or so. Yeah.
It's true.
So, Scott, well, I'm going to ask you the first question to get this started, and that is, how did you get into this business? What gets you excited about music?
I love music from the time I was a little kid, and my dad played the organ by ear, and he always wanted a Hammond organ. And the first one he bought was a Hammond chord organ, which was kind of more like an accordion.
Yeah, that thing, it has a pump, right?
It didn't pump. It only had two pedals, which just did like, that kind of thing. And just like you were playing an accordion, and it had the buttons like an accordion. And I didn't really care about that much, but I used to really like to watch movies, probably science fiction movies, because it was back then, early 60s or something. And I remember loving that we had this new instrument in the house, even though I didn't know anything about it. But I would go, and after I heard a movie, and I would try to make the sound, the sound.
So you were interested in the scores from the movies?
That's right.
Oh, okay.
And I loved the music, and I would try to sound it out and once my dad realized I was interested in music, that was his big go ahead to talk my mom into buying a better Hammond organ, which he did,
Right.
Which was an L100, which is a spinet, but it had the drawbars and everything, which is a small version of a B3, So I went on, and I was learning how to. Same thing. Always was interested in playing it, but I'd go down the street and, I would play with my friends mainly. And
was this something you could move this organ?
Well, no, it was just in the house.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And I was 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. And I remember going down to the neighbors, and they had a piano, and the kids were taking piano lessons, and I started to really think, I'd watch him and go, I want to know how to do that. So I started taking piano lessons, but the piano didn't really translate well to the organ. I'd have to go to the lesson and play on the piano, with pedals and all that, with sustain pedals. And then I'd have to go home and learn the lesson on the organ, which sometimes even the notes went right off the the organ keyboard. Because
it wasn't full size.
Yeah, it wasn't full size. Yeah. It was only 5 octaves. Yeah, so then I was learning fast enough that my parents and my piano teacher decided, you should get an organ teacher. And I did, and the guy was great. He was an excellent teacher, Bob Zellin. I often wonder what happened to him because he was an excellent organist. But he really tried to put me in the fast lane, like, oh, you're really good. Here's a book. I learn all the songs by the end of the week. And I was a kid. I like music, but I don't want to. Right. I want to play baseball with my friends, and I want to do, all this other stuff. And he'd get mad at me because I learned 3 of them, out of the 6. And pretty soon I didn't like it anymore. I don't want to take lessons anymore, so I quit. And then fast forward, I'm 14 years old or something, and some of my friends are starting to play music. Is that the Beatles, all that stuff's out. It's a wonderful time for music,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very inspiring for young people. Yeah.
Totally. And and it was also, it was a big cultural thing too. Oh yeah, you were part of a real movement. Things were happening. So it appealed to me in every way. I was totally into it. I loved the Doors. I thought the Doors were the greatest.
Ray Manzarek fan.
I really have to, say that guy influenced me big time. Like, I wanted to be Ray Manzarek.
Right. Sure.
And so now, again, I got interested in playing music, and my friends were starting to have bands, and I kind of watch them and go, well, I think I could play the keyboard better than that. You get into that. I think so. And then I started to practice again. Then I got really serious. I really wanted to do it.
And so then did you have a piano, or what did you?
Still had an organ.
Still that organ, okay.
Worse than that. My dad had bought a Lowry organ at this point. I was like, I wanted a B3 or anything. So he was really cool about it. And I'd worked for him. He had his own business, and I had some money. And he said, well, if you want to buy an organ, I'll help you, And so, I thought, I want to buy a Vox Continental, just like Ray Manzarek. Okay. But I couldn't afford one, so I had to buy a Vox Jaguar, which was really quite a step down. But I didn't care. I was just happy to have it, I had like a Jordan amp, and I thought, wow, yeah, I'm ready to go now. That was.
You got everything you need. You can be a rock star.
Ready to go, yeah. And it was, I was kind of just playing around with friends. I would meet somebody, like maybe a drummer would come over and spend the night, and we'd play some songs that I knew and some songs that, we could play together. And then for some reason there got to be kind of people knew that I played, and, it always seems that there's somewhat of a shortage of keyboard players who want to play in bands, maybe because the gear's expensive, I don't know. But eventually there was a band that was a blues band. And these 2 guys, the drummer and the harp/singer, who were older than I was by 2 or 3 years, which, in high school is like,
yeah, it's like
forever.
They're like grown-ups. Yeah.
Yeah. They were my best friend, one of my best friends who played guitar. They needed a guitar player and an organ player for their band. But we were playing things like, Iron Butterfly or things like that, and they were playing blues, which I didn't, and I didn't really know that much about. But of course, what a great thing to get into, So okay, now I'm in a blues band. I'm learning blues songs, and we're probably in sophomore, junior year of high school, probably sophomore then, and we get in this band, and there's a battle of the bands. And I'm so nervous. I don't even know what I'm doing up there. And, I think, well, all these other bands are in here. But the harp player was really good. I mean, these other guys were really good. And we won this battle of the bands, Wow. So it was, now.
Was it at a car show?
It wasn't. It was at a carnival.
Oh,
okay. But it was kind of, it made me feel like, oh, well, maybe, we don't suck,
Yeah, well, you won.
Yeah, exactly. And then we started doing gigs and stuff. And, I wasn't making a lot of money or anything, but it was fun.
Yeah. Money wasn't the important thing.
And I remember really vividly at one point, these guys pulled out a Buddy Miles record. And it's funny because Kenny Dale, the drummer with Chris, and I talk about this song, I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's essentially a Hammond organ trio with buddies in it singing. And it's a full-blown blues song, but with, a great Hammond player. And, I had a Vox Jaguar. Like, I couldn't make that sound, and I didn't understand one thing that guy was playing, but all I cared about at that moment was, I want to understand what that guy is playing, because that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
So, then the hunt was on. I wanted to get a Hammond, and I think around that time too was about the time when, I was still into all the Doors stuff and that, but people were starting to introduce me to, John Lord and all this kind of stuff was happening, and probably the very beginnings of like, here's the nice, here's this guy, Emerson, what the heck,
Lee Michaels?
Lee Michaels, absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally was into Lee Michaels.
Yeah, I'm sure you were.
Yeah, totally into it. And especially that one live, he and Frosty did live in the studio. That organ sounded insanely great.
Did you ever see him live?
I never did.
I did.
Was he great?
He was great.
I heard he was really loud.
He was very loud. He had 4 Leslies. He had 2 stacked up on each side of the stage. And
did he have all the acoustic amps yet too? Later he
probably,
had a lot of acoustic amps.
I wasn't.
And they were
so
mic him through it. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't really know about the production, but I remember, it was loud. And
the organ was supposedly modified and did all these crazy things. But I remember that song. What was it? Da, 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 da. That song was so awesome. I thought all that stuff was so great. I forgot about Lee Michaels. A friend of mine is a friend of his now, strangely. And he's kind of an eccentric guy, owns a restaurant. But
so did you finally get your Hammond? Is that where we're leading here?
I finally got a Hammond. I could only afford to spin it. So I got an M3, which was, kind of B3 era. It had one speaker in it. And but I thought that was great. I mean, I was so happy to have
a Leslie, too?
I had a Leslie, and I had my parents', but it was an old one, and so it didn't have a slow speed on it. And I kept trying to get people I knew who knew electronics to modify it, which my dad was very patient. I got to give him credit for that. And he was doubly patient because we would move it, and it was part of the furniture at home. And move that, it's tough to move those things.
Yeah, not easy.
Yeah. So I had that, and starting to play more dances, playing like Three Dog Night stuff and things like that. All these people with Hammonds, now I could do their songs, and
right.
I was totally into that. And then I guess I really started to get kind of into the prog thing, because I think for me at that point I realized I really wanted to become a better player. That was my big focus. And if you wanted to be a better player and have better ear training and everything, I wanted to understand more complicated music,
And the prog rock stuff was definitely fit that bill.
It really did. I mean, even and now sometimes you go, this is pretty excessive stuff, but it was a lot of fun as a challenge, the Yes stuff and all that kind of stuff to tackle as a player.
Yeah.
And as I started doing that kind of stuff, I remember then I started to get a reputation. Oh yeah, I did that kind of stuff. And then I wanted to take lessons. And I went right back to that same teacher who I got rid of when I was 8, because I realized how good he was.
Right. And you just weren't ready.
I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
It's absolutely true. So I went back to him, and again, now it was like night and day. This was like, oh, yeah, I loved it, took it like a sponge. He taught me so many things, and it was just great. And he told me, because you really like Bach and stuff like that, because the prog stuff kind of sent me to classical music. My parents really weren't musical, and they didn't, they didn't listen to any jazz or any classical music. And now I was really getting, I was hearing a lot of what was interesting about the prog stuff to me was it was actually sending me to the real classical music it was derived from, or the real jazz it was derived from. And now I was really getting a full, education of, wow, I don't know anything. I have so much to learn. And it was great. So I started taking classical lessons, pipe organ for a little while. That was sort of a trip. probably the big thing for me then was some friends of mine. Some people, recommended, they go, there are these two guys and they were brothers. They moved from Georgia and they need a keyboard player. And I went over to visit them and they really had a good band, but they weren't playing any music I had ever heard. It was almost all like Allman Brothers and things like that. And I really hadn't paid any attention to that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And of course, I don't care who you are as a musician. You listen to the Allman Brothers, especially back then, you go, holy crap, who are these guys?
Yeah.
They're great,
Yeah.
So that was a whole nother, wow, new world, learned got into that kind of whole thing. And that was about the time I got out of high school. They moved back to Nashville, the whole band, minus me. So I was really torn. I really wanted to go. But then I was going to college. And I went to my first semester of college and went, I don't know. I think I want to try this. And I went back to Nashville. And that was the first time I'd left home. I was in a band, and that's all we did. Music,
And you guys were making enough to live on?
No. It was really weird. We didn't make anything. We had two managers who supported us while we wrote songs and worked on original music, and we're going to make a record.
Wow.
I know. They were selling drugs to do it. But
well, there's that.
whatever you have to do. We didn't care. It was immersive music. That's all we did. And that was wonderful for me because that was kind of the first taste of what it might be like to be in a band, to be on the road, to everybody's cooperating and working on music and trying to go in a single direction. And it was great, but, it kind of fell apart after about 6 months because, we didn't have any money. Things didn't go like we planned, the usual. So I came back and went to school and then played in bands the whole time I was in school and really got into, like Earth, Wind, and Fire and stuff. And this was when I, Steely Dan, and really was learning a whole different kind of complex music. You know?
Did you major in music in college?
Minored in it. Kind of, and my reason my thinking was, I loved music and I took a lot of theory and stuff like that. I wish I would have taken more orchestration and stuff because I was really interested in that stuff. But I was concerned that it was, if I didn't make it in music, I didn't want to be a classical musician. I already knew that.
Yeah.
And I was concerned that if I didn't make it in music, that I wouldn't have anywhere else to fall back. So I was an English major just with the intention of, if I can't make it, then I can do something else. Uh-huh. But one of the interesting things that was like a who knew kind of moment was, in order to even be have a minor in music, you had to take, strangely, or maybe it was just a general ed requirement, I can't remember at this point, you had to take a science class. And so one of the classes that was available was physics for musicians, the physics of music. And, so that was a no-brainer. Okay, I got to take a physics class, because I remember I had to take a math class too, so there's probably some general ed thing.
Yeah, probably was, yeah.
And at the time, I thought of it as one of those, okay, good, I'll get my, science requirement out of the way, and, I'll do whatever I have to do. And it turned out to be one of the most interesting and life-changing classes I ever took, because it was the beginning of electronic music, and I'd never listened to any of that stuff, Morton Subotnick, this kind of stuff, these, tape guys who were just cutting tape up, but, oscillators just coming in, Moog synthesizers were just starting. I remember we went to Paul Beaver's studio, and he had old Nova chords. He had an early modular Moog. And I was hooked. I'm like, what is this?
Yeah, a whole new thing. Yeah.
This is awesome. Like I want to know how to do this. So, and even learning the physics of sound, I don't know, for some reason, most of the people didn't care. Like they did exactly what I thought I would do. Well, okay, good. I'm done with my physics, but I was fascinated by it. Like, wow, how overtones, how piano is tuned, how there's, stretch tuning because of inharmonicity and stuff. This stuff fascinated me, and I was totally into it. And that was the beginning of my, getting into the synth programming and all that, for sure.
Yeah, this is something that I didn't mention in your introduction, is that you also, I know for years, have worked for Yamaha and have been a big programmer for them. You've created all kinds of sounds and stuff that are in the Yamaha products.
Yeah, I've done it for other companies too, primarily for them, absolutely. But
so that's where it all started. For
you. I'm sure that we'll talk about this as we go chronologically through things, because this has always been a big part of my music career, and I would say I've been really lucky to have been born in a time when all these things developed during my lifetime, and also to be interested not only in music, but to have enough technical ability, because there are plenty of musicians who are better musicians than I am, but they're not interested in the technology, so they never knew how to program synths and stuff. And these things really dovetailed to make my career for me in terms of being able to, come to an artist who needs a keyboard player to come up with parts and sounds and everything for a show, and be able to deliver not only the playing part of it, but the technical ability to go get the sounds, put together all the things that are needed to make that song sound like it did on the record.
Yeah.
And that a lot of times involves a lot of technical ability that often they would have to hire somebody else to do. But in my case, they didn't, which gave me a leg up sometimes.
Yeah. Especially in those early days, when Fleetwood Mac, Steely Dan, Don Henley, who you worked with, and all those groups were coming out, and they were really featuring the new synth sounds and stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I know that you were really cranking it at that time. But so before we get too far into that, let's finish your stint in college and getting out into the world.
So I'm playing with bands. It got to the point where I was so busy with bands. I remember my last year it was my last year in school. I had a jazz class, and I had to go to the teacher and tell him, I'm going to be gone for the next 2 weeks. This was happening routinely now because I was out of town playing with a band. I was making pretty good money. And I, or at least for me, for that time, I remember the guy saying, well, don't worry about the credits. I'm just going to give you credit anyway, because that's a better use of your time and to have a music career than just learning what I'm teaching you.
Right. Yeah, you're probably beyond what they were doing. Yeah.
He was totally cool. I love that. So I got out of school, and I started kind of working on being an English teacher. And now I actually was in a club band, and I was working 5 nights a week too, and I was making pretty good money.
And so then you had graduated with your BA, and then you were going for your teaching credentials.
That was the plan.
Okay,
yeah. And
I can see that ending real quick.
And before I even got started, I was starting to make pretty good money. And I always tell people it was a hilarious moment. I went back to high school. I was really torn. I didn't know what to do, and I went and found my English teacher there, who I really respected, and we went out to lunch. And I started asking him, well, what do you think? And I remember him saying, well, you probably won't like you won't like people telling you what to do so much here already. There was that kind of business. But the capper was hilarious. I go, well, how much does a starting teacher make? And he told me. I go, I'm already making that much playing nightclubs. And so I chucked it. I just completely went, forget it, not thinking, oh, yeah, but you get a pension and you might...
there's other things.
You have a path in the future to something more. But, when you're a kid, you're like, what do I care,
Exactly.
If I get to do this and I make the same amount of money and I'm having a blast.
Yeah.
I'm playing in clubs, there are girls drinking, I'm playing music every day and I'm, writing songs and this is great. Why would I change this, So I stupidly or not just went, I'm doing this,
Well, it didn't turn out to be it absolutely turned out to be the right decision in your case.
It did. But who knew? So, I mean, I was playing with a lot of good musicians and I was really lucky. And I was really lucky once again to be in a time where you could literally work in a band between your 5 nights a week and your casuals on the weekend. I tell people, I lived in Orange County, California with other people in an apartment, made the payments in the apartment, bought a Mini Moog, bought a Prophet 5 for what, $4,000 in 1979 or 8?
Yeah, it's like $20,000 now.
Yes, exactly. And had the money. I could save it. And I wasn't borrowing it. I had it. You couldn't do that in a million years now. It was that I was so lucky. And, same deal. First, a Mini Moog. Okay, well, Mini Moog didn't have presets. How does the Mini Moog work? What do you want to change sounds? You had to learn how the Mini Moog worked,
Yeah.
Same thing. By the time I got the Prophet, I was like, I was into it. I knew.
Yeah, those synthesizers, I'm sure they came with some presets, but mostly you're programming that stuff.
A lot of programming. So... Again, lucky me, I was interested. So I spent my days, I'd bring that Prophet home, I'd bring that Mini Moog home, and I'd work on it, and I'd take it to the gig that night, and I'd put it up, and I'd have new sounds. And what happened was just what you think happens. I got together with a lot of great musicians. People started to hire us to do sessions. We were doing sessions, meeting other good musicians. Finally, there was, a group of people who went, we'd really like to put a band together. And we did, and it was, I went from playing kind of clubs in rock clubs to playing nicer and nicer clubs till I was at the beach playing really nice clubs, and we were playing a lot of Steely Dan and stuff like that. Everybody band was really good. The guys in Kenny Loggins' band all lived down there, Laguna and stuff. They'd come in and sit in, and it became a kind of, people would come, to see a really great band with a lot of great musicians. I mean, everybody in that band was great. I felt like I wasn't struggling to keep up, but you worked to keep up with the other guys in the band. They were all great. So and here's how I got my break. So I'm playing this. This is a popular band. Where lots of people come at this point, and we're playing at a place that's it's on the water in Newport, and people pull up their yachts, and it's big deal, So this one guy used to come in all the time, and he just couldn't have been a nicer guy. And we talked, and I didn't know who he was. And we would play. The deal was we would play Wednesday through Saturday nights. And like I said, it was popular, a lot of partying, it was crazy. But then we had to play Sunday afternoon, and the Sunday afternoon gig was always a bit of a drag because you were probably hungover, and it was. You had to play a little quieter, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah. And more mellow stuff, probably.
Yeah. And so it was, we didn't always love that. And I remember you'd get done sometimes in that gig, and then you had to tear everything down, and those days I had like a Fender Rhodes and, a Mini Moog and a Prophet, and everything I had was heavy, it seemed like.
Yeah, all that stuff was heavy, yeah.
And we had to tear it out of there, and I'm wrapping up chords, because there are a million of them. And this guy once again comes up, and he's talking to me, and I'm kind of thinking that, I'm exhausted, don't want to talk, but the guy's so nice. And I remember finally saying, you are the nicest guy, you're so cool, and I've never introduced myself. And I introduced myself, and he goes, well, hi, I'm David Foster. And
only David Foster.
Yeah. And David, and probably he wasn't famous to most people, but as a keyboardist musician, like he'd just written After the Love Is Gone with, I knew exactly who he was. And I go, David Foster, the David Foster. He goes, oh, well, you've heard of me? I go, I'm probably playing half your parts in these songs, And he just couldn't have been nicer. So he kept coming down, and then now we would hang out with him, and he'd bring, Jerry Hay or somebody. There was always somebody well known who was with him, and it was amazing. And he basically would talk to the guitar player and me. He came to bring us out. And finally one day he goes, "Look, you guys, I'm just finishing working on Boz Scaggs' new record, And he goes, I think he needs some people for his tour. Would you be interested?" Well, what do you think our answer was?
Yeah, maybe.
So, we were doing that band. I loved that band. It was a bit of and we were doing a lot of originals, and we were having some progress, and we were playing in L.A. a lot, doing our original stuff. And so at one point we played in L.A., and he brought Boz's manager or tour manager. And then we went over after the show, we went over to David's house. And he and the tour manager were there and said, "Yeah, would you two like to audition?" And, we were like, "Oh, yeah, of course." And I remember staying up nights. And this was when synths really were big, because it was 1980. And it was, Steve Porcaro and all those guys had worked on this record.
Yep.
And there were a boatload of synths on there, a lot of CS80 and stuff. I'd never used a CS80. That was a complicated synth, and so I was like, oh, I don't know. But I had a couple of Prophets, and, I went in and did the audition, and, they had a couple of complicated songs I knew they were going to throw at me, and I really had tried to do the dance and get them to work, and I guess I did well enough because I got the gig.
What about the guitar player? Did he get the gig?
He also got the gig.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but, that kind of tore up that band, which wasn't so great. But then everybody was also proud of us because, we got this big gig. Because Boz at the time was still pretty big. I mean, we were...
Oh, he was huge then. Yeah,
yeah, we were...
Because that record was probably Down 2 Then Left, right?
No, it was Middleman.
Oh, okay. So it was after that.
Yeah, it was 1980. So 76, I think, was Silk Degrees or something like that, wasn't it?
Something like that.
And then 78 was Down 2, and then 80 was Middleman.
Okay.
But people were somewhat disappointed in Middleman, although I consider a lot of Middleman really good, and I think they just expected Silk Degrees, and
yeah,
if
Boz, keep making the same record over.
If Boz, predictably he wouldn't do that. Uh-huh. but he kind of came back on Middleman. It was a little bit more commercial again, so it was a big deal, and that was my first.
Your big break. Yeah,
that was my break.
And that got you in with the management company that managed a bunch of other bands that you ended up working with
Frontline
too, right?
at the time.
Frontline Management, Craig Fruin.
Yeah, Craig, but it was Irving's company, I believe.
Yes.
Irving Azoff. Yeah, but Craig was in, and
because we worked with Michael McDonald, Craig Fruin was his manager from Frontline Management.
And it's like so many other things. People ask me, "How did you get all these tours?" They go, "Well, it's like a small town. Once you get in to the touring group, you see a lot of the same faces over and over again, right? Because it's, and once people start to know each other, the guitar player winds up on another gig and goes, "Oh, I know a keyboard player." You know how that works.
Yeah, it still works that way today.
Absolutely.
That's how I got this gig, because I called you 6 months ago to do this interview, and
that's right.
We never got around to it until now, but. In that course of conversation, you said, "Hey, I think that Chris Isaak band might be needing a new front of house engineer," and
you'd be perfect, and you
then
are.
And then it worked out, So yeah, again, it's all word of mouth, really, and endorsements from people that matter.
It's true.
Yeah,
I mean, because what do it isn't a job where you look at the person's where they went to school or something. That doesn't,
it doesn't matter whatsoever.
No, none of that matters. Exactly.
So how long did you tour with Boz, and then that worked into other tours? So tell me a little bit about that, and or any interesting stories you might have about the Boz touring. Well,
everything about the Boz tour was interesting because I didn't know anything.
Yeah, you were brand new. You were green.
I tend to last a long time with the people I work with. I mean, I worked with Boz on and off for 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and I worked with Henley for 15. It's...
You must be ancient.
I am. And that's another thing. I thought I'd be done doing this a long time ago. Yeah. But I remember, everything was new. It was just, it was wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. But by far more wonderful than terrifying.
Yeah.
Because
I'm sure the first day you went out and you're used to playing in clubs in front of maybe, a few hundred people, and now all of a sudden you're playing somewhere for thousands of people.
So, of course, this is strangely my first night of touring is one of my most vivid, bizarre on the tour stories.
Okay.
And so, it's hilarious, actually. So Boz had a tendency, he had a set list that was somewhat fixed, but he would kind of fix it. In this case, he fixed it more or less the day of the show. And like you mentioned, the first show was at, I think, Sacramento Arena.
Oh, 15,000 people.
Yeah, I don't know how many, but it was thousands.
Most arenas are 10 to 15,000 people. Yeah.
So as you say, I had gone from playing clubs to my first gig with this guy was going to be for thousands of people. Yeah, maybe 10,000 kind of people, And Boz calls me shortly before a couple hours for the show and goes, "Oh, I was thinking about adding this song, and it's actually one of the more complicated songs, but I love the song. I don't care, but this is the way it is." And in those days, I don't have any instrument to play. I'm just going to go up and do it. I was one of two keyboard players. The other keyboard player, Randy Kerber, who's fascinating and does, movies, every movie you probably ever heard. Guy was fabulous even then. Could sight read anything. And just great. And he was playing the pianos and I was playing all the synths. We were divided up like that. So it was a funny setup. We had so many keyboards back in those days. It wasn't like MIDI. We had separate keyboards. So we literally had we were both on the same riser, and we had almost a box of keyboards. Like, a Rhodes was in front, the piano's over to the side. Then I had to face backwards with three of my synths, and then on my right was another tower of synths. So it was, an insane keyboard rig,
Yeah.
That's the way it was back then.
Yeah.
So in order to accommodate this weird setup and fix it so I could see the cues, because Boz has a lot of cues, I had to have a rear view mirror so that I could see because I was facing backwards a lot of the time.
And probably that was getting blown out by the lights most of the time.
Oh, everything about it was a problem.
Yeah.
But what was weird is, like I say, we'd never run the set exactly the way the set was about to be run. I was so nervous. I literally drank an entire bottle of wine, and it was as if I hadn't touched a drop. I had that much adrenaline. I didn't feel it, And so we go up to play the show, and I'm looking at the set list. In those days, we had mini Moogs, and those suckers had to be tuned.
Often.
Yes.
Yes. So
I can see that we're coming up to a song, Harbor Lights, which I love, but it has an electric piano intro. Great. Now we've checked out this system basically, but I'm not sure exactly how everything is, but I'm just doing what I was doing at rehearsal, and I think this is my time to tune the mini Moog. And he's songs in C, and he's doing his intro. And I have got the headphones on, and I hit A440, turn A440 on the mini Moog, and I'm tuning all the oscillators, right? And
it's going into the house.
Out of the corner of my eye, I see this thing something going on in my rear view mirror. What is that? It's Boz. And Boz is waving his hand over his head. And I'm like, what's going on? And I pull my cans off my head real quickly, and I can hear A440 blasting through.
Oh, no.
So I'm thinking, oh my God, they've been listening to me tune this instrument. Oh, I'm like so embarrassed, you know? And I think, that's it. That was my first gig, and that's my last gig.
Oh, man.
But he was really nice about it, you know, and we figured out how I could do it so that it wasn't always it wasn't coming through the house at the same time.
Oh, my God.
But it was devastating. Like, oh my God, you know, what a rookie error.
And then you were probably just totally freaked out for the rest of the show.
I was, you know, when am I going to tune the Moog? How's this going to work? You know, but there you go. It's still to this day probably one of the worst things that's ever happened to me in terms of gaffes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Well, you didn't know. I mean, it was an innocent mistake. You were trying to do your job, but you hadn't worked that out yet. Yeah.
And he couldn't have been cooler about it. But, you know, the whole thing was so great for me because, you know, we traveled places I'd never traveled before. And I was so lucky because a lot of the people had been in the, you know, they were veterans. And, you know, the people in the band were crazy. It was like Mike Porcaro, Carlos Vega, Lenny Castro. It's like every single, you know, for a while there we had Mike Landau was on the guitar. I mean, every single person, you know, Jeff Porcaro would come sit in. Every person who came in was like a hero of mine.
Yeah,
it was like
absolutely.
That, you know?
Really good players.
Really good players. You know, David Page would come and sit in, and you're like, wow, this is great, you know, and David Foster would come and hang. And Vanetta Fields was one of the singers, and, you know, she, you know, sang with, you know, Pink Floyd and all these other people. She was just Steely Dan. She was on those records, and they were such pros. And she would take me in, you know, go, okay, we're going to this restaurant when we get to this town. You know, the education was insane, you know, so.
Wow. That's a great first tour to get on.
It was awesome. We went to Japan. We went all over the world. In Australia. Yeah. It was, you know, in the arenas, huge crowds, Budokan, multiple nights, you know, it was like a dream come true. Yeah, it really was.
That's fantastic. Who came next?
It was funny. So I played with Boz, but Boz didn't, you know, he did a big tour in 80. And then it kind of continued on through 81 and so on. But I think...
Michael McDonald next?
No, Michael wasn't next. Don was next.
Oh, okay.
So I can remember, this is really funny. We'd done some Japanese tour, and it was Kevin Dukes, guitar player, and I were on the plane back from Japan, and, you know, somebody pulled out their Walkman.
Of course.
and he goes, I just got Don Henley's new record. He was Building the Perfect Beast. And I go, oh, I really like this first record, you know? Let's hear that. So we both plugged in together, and we were listening, and I go, oh, man, if that guy does a tour, because there were tons of keyboards on it. It was like, I go, this is going to be a challenge. I go, I would love to do this tour. That would be great, you know? Not thinking any more of it. And literally, within a few weeks, he was looking for keyboard players to audition for his band. And somebody called me. And I go, you got to be kidding. And there was already a tentative guy, Jay Winding, on the piano. I go, I'll do the synths, because that's what I'd been doing with Boz. So same deal. I stayed up all night and learned, you know, or a few nights. Boys of Summer programmed them all into my synths and did the thing. Hopped into my Econoline and dragged all my synths down. I didn't have like anybody to do
no cartage,
cartage or anything. And I just went down and set all the stuff up. And he wasn't there anyway. We ran through the songs while Jay and I got along great. And Jay was like, oh, how about this here? Like, okay, fixing stuff. And Don came in, and it was really strange. It was like, I played. He never said a word other than, hey, it sounds good. It was very, very casual. And then it's like, hey, can you come back tomorrow? Sure. New drummer there the next day. And pretty soon I realized we're we're auditioning people, but nobody is actually in the band yet. We're just all guys still auditioning, sort of, you know?
But there was a musical director, right?
Jay, I think, was the musical director.
So he was in the band for sure.
As far as I knew, but I never knew who was in and who was still auditioning, you know?
Right.
But as far as I knew, Jay was in. That was the only one I knew. And then this went on, and then they were calling me to come back. And then I remember one day I went, am I in the band or not? Because, you know, I have a lot of other things I'm not getting paid, and I could be doing a lot of other things, and I don't really get what we're doing. And then it was like, yeah, you're in the band. Okay.
Oh, cool.
Great. Yeah. So, yeah, that was amazing. And that was, again, wow, you know, Don sitting down. Okay, so we did this with 1 million synthesizers and samples, and I want this to sound like that, and I want this to do that. Well, you know, if you want that to sound like that we're going to have to sample that probably.
Off the record.
Yeah, because some stuff was just was on a sequencer and things, or we're going to have to play with a sequencer. So it was kind of like, well, what do we need to do this? And Jay and I were sitting down and going, well, you know, if you could get a deal with Yamaha, you know, because at the time they had all the DXs, you know, the TX816s and all the stuff, and MIDI was, you know.
All the new stuff, yeah.
All the new stuff.
Cutting edge.
And we needed sequencers and stuff, and Jay was kind of like, and you like to do this stuff, so, you know.
It's all on you.
And you know those guys, so let's see if we can do it. We did. And we got all this stuff. But even then, they didn't have any samplers or anything, and Don wanted certain things, and I go, well, you know, like building. He wanted all that stuff the way it was on the record. Mm-hmm. You know, and that was like, you know, 20 of his closest friends sampled, you know, on 5 tracks, you know, or something, you know. So I go, how we can't make it sound like that with just a little band, you know. And he go, no, we're going to sample it. And I was like, well, I mean, if we could get an emulator too or something like that, that would be great. And he got like a bunch of them. and we had like a week in the studio with the master tapes. And, you know, I had to learn that, you know, but I was into it, you know, and we sampled and chopped, and we, you know, had everything on the disc. And, you know, we would figure out song like at the end of Sunset Grill, we go, well, you know, no sample thing's going to sound like those horns. Those sound awesome, you know. So we had to figure out, but how are we going to know when they come in? Oh, well, we're going to have to count bars, and we're going to have to, you know, we couldn't handle all the keyboard parts, even with 2 of us, you know.
Wow.
So it was such a learning experience. It was like, okay, we can MIDI this to that, and then the sequencer will fire that part.
And nobody thought about just playing to tracks and just having some tape machines running?
We would have had, but in those days, we probably would have had to have real tape. But here was the deal. Here's what our thinking was. And I still use this with Chris. By the way, we're still doing this with, you know, Ring of Fire. So we learned that what we could do was there were only certain songs like that one where we really had to adhere to the actual structure of the song. But what I learned pretty quickly was if I took the samples and I somehow stretched or fixed it so that there was a little overlap on the samples, we could play them manually. And then we didn't have to care if we changed the arrangement.
Right.
And that was a big concern of ours in those days. Oh, well, what if somebody gets off? What if we decide, if the solo goes, we decide to make a solo longer or whatever? What's going to happen? I remember there was always a big discussion about it. So we figured out how we could play the samples. We put them on the keyboard, and we wouldn't make it wouldn't be the whole phrase. It'd be a little part of the phrase here and then a little part here. So you could play them and kind of tuck them in, you know, if something.
But for a musician, that's kind of hard too, right? Because you're not playing in time necessarily.
That's correct.
You're hitting a key that might not even be close to in time because you're actually just triggering a sample, not actually playing something musical.
Correct. And not to mention you go, well, it makes no musical sense anyway. You just make like a chromatic scale of different phrases. You weren't thinking, oh, I'm hearing a C, I'm playing a C. It wasn't like that.
And I know for musicians it's really hard to do that.
But somehow
you did it.
We did it.
Yeah.
And it really worked.
It did really work. I saw that concert. I saw it at the Universal Amphitheater, and it was fantastic.
I was so proud of us, and it was, and I was really proud of, I was really proud to be a part of it because, it's rare that you get into a situation like I was in with that particular tour where Don was willing to spare no expense. He wanted that show. It was his first solo tour, and, he wanted it to be great. And I was telling you earlier, we literally spent more time rehearsing for that tour than the tour itself was in terms of length of time.
Wow.
I mean, he hired somebody to teach him how to dance, or, teach he and one of the background singers how to do a tango so that they could do it to Hotel California. And, he was really committed. Here's a guy who sat behind the drums, and now he's up in front. And he was really committed to making sure that it was entertaining, that it was a show, and it was excellent. And it was such a wonderful experience. And the other guy who was Danny Korchmar, who didn't wind up doing the tour, but wound up doing all the rehearsals, and then he didn't really want to do the tour. But Danny was another real big influence on me because I didn't really realize how much Danny had to do with the record. So I was just kind of like, a little arrogant, punky guy, I'd done other tours, and he'd go, that part you're playing there, it isn't really exactly like it is on the record. On the record, we did blah, 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 and he would explain to me what happened. And I go, really? It didn't sound like that, Danny, but I'll go give it a listen. And he was always right. I was like, what? And I finally realized how much he had to do with all this stuff.
He was big on that record.
I mean, some of that stuff came off on a Kai 12 track. He had made the demo, and they dumped the stuff over to Ladani was, I think, helping produce the engineer at least, and he and they would just dump it over to the 24 track, and that would be the starting point. And some of those tracks, many of them, I think, never got replaced. Mm-hmm. They were actually the original tracks. And Cooch had done a great job of all that stuff. It was a great education, and again, a humbling experience when you're like, you don't know so much, and these guys really do know a lot. These guys who are, older than you and have been doing this a long time, they really do know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
It was great.
So any other little tidbits about that tour, anything about Don or anything that you can tell us, or?
No, I can't think of anything in particular. It was
nothing that you can actually say.
It was. I'll just say this: it was a wild time. It was a lot of younger people, and it was a co-ed tour with all the craziness you can imagine.
It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
It
right?
was. I mean, it was. One of the members, I remember, said that after he'd been up all night, the band members, we were sitting at breakfast. And he said to the waitress, I couldn't believe it, I'll have scrambled eggs and rails. Hold the scrambled eggs. It was that crazy, that crazy of a time. And but we were, the tour turned into a big tour, and it was like there were celebrities there always. Like, every time you turn around, it was almost intimidating. Everybody I'd see backstage was some famous person,
Yeah. And the record was a huge success. It was highly respected in the music world,
Yeah.
And everybody loved it. And it's still, I just listened to the whole record yesterday. It's a fantastic record, yeah.
It was great. And Don was great. And he was, he was always doing a lot of political things. And, it was fun. I mean, I think for him it was a little scary, to climb out and be the front man.
Yeah.
But he got comfortable with it pretty quickly, and he, like I say, I really loved that. I loved his commitment to it being excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, I don't think I'm going out on a limb here when I say Don can be anal, but
I remember too, when I saw that show, it was before Moving Lights. But what you guys had, moving trusses.
Yes.
And nobody had as far as I know, nobody had ever done that before. But you'd be watching, and I think maybe it was during "Building the Perfect Beast," that song where I don't know how many trusses. There was several trusses. Of course, they were all loaded with park cans, and they would move in these weird angles and stuff. It was stunning.
It was amazing. I mean, and it was a little scary because those big trusses are over your head moving.
Right.
You know, they could knock you out.
Kill you. Yes.
Yeah, kill you is exactly true. But yeah, that's what I mean. Exactly.
Innovative.
He did that, and it was innovative. Exactly. There was he never balked at it. You know, if it was something that was going to be unique, he was willing to pay for it and make a really cool show.
Yeah, well, it most certainly was.
Yeah.
So what happened then? Don Henley, did you start working for other people during that, or did that just end and then you moved on to something else?
That ended. A lot of times, you know, Chris is an unusual, maybe not so unusual anymore because touring's more of a thing now to make money. But in those days, the music business worked the polar opposite of the way it works now. You made an album, and the album is where you made all your money.
Yeah.
And then you toured just to lure people in to hear hear it and promote, and then go buy the record.
Yeah.
Now it's the opposite. Nobody makes any money off the record. They make the record to lure people in to come see the concert again. You know what
exactly,
I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's now they're new songs. But so you know, in those days, so you get a couple of years of touring, and then the artist took off to work on their new record.
And make a new record, which might take a year or two. Or
yeah, in his case, he was slow. Yeah, it took a while. I don't think the next one came out till 89, 90. So in that time, I wound up working. How did I wind up with?
Because you still have Stevie Nicks and Michael McDonald to get to.
Yeah, but the Michael thing became sideways for me. Somebody I knew got involved with Maureen.
Maureen McDonald, yes.
Yes.
Michael's younger sister.
So Maureen sang on I Keep Forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't know, because of that, there was some interest in her or whatever, what the root, you know, impetus was for that whole band. But she wanted to get together and have a band, and we were doing like nightclubs to make money, but we were all writing on the side, you know, and writing together a lot, that whole group.
Right.
And of course, once we started to get some material and there was, we were starting to get a little more serious, we played all the stuff for Michael, who decided to produce the record. Right. So then all the writing and stuff we were doing with him as well, or a lot of it. I mean, we were at his house a lot. Yep. And he was in the process of building a studio at the same time.
Because I was there.
Yes. Yeah. That's when I met you. Right.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it was, that again, great time. That was the first time I'd been in a band where I wasn't working for another artist per se. I was part of the
actual band.
Part of the band, yeah. And I was involved in the writing, and I was involved in the arranging and all of it. It wasn't just coming in and you know, to something that was already started or pretty far along. Here, put some keyboard parts on. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that was really fun. And what was completely awesome was to be able to watch Michael write. When he helped us write, you know, I got to watch his ideas and go, oh, wow, I would have never thought of that. Well, that's a great idea, you know? Yeah. And again, Michael's not a guy who writes simple things. No. So it was a lot of it's challenging, you know? And I mean, I wrote one of the songs. I mean, he co-wrote at least two of the songs with us, and I got to help write lyrics and everything with him and watch the whole thing. And that was wonderful to me. And one of my favorite stories to tell about him, because A Change of Heart was the song we wrote together. And I had written the original, you know, I think I was, a lot of times I liked programming sounds, because one of the things you got out of it was you get a good sound, if it was a sound you liked, and it would kind of inspire you. While you were playing the sound, sometimes unconsciously, you were playing something that was evocative, and the two things were becoming kind of symbiotic. The sound was being tailored to what you were playing, and what you're playing is being tailored to the sound. And pretty soon you go, I don't know what it is I'm playing. This is really neat. I guess I wrote it now,
Right.
And so that's the way that song came about. And then Michael liked parts, Maureen's husband,
Tom,
yeah, Tom Ferguson, who was great. And a lot of fun, because we would argue. A lot of times we wouldn't always agree, but he was always, he was a good guy to be in a band with. He was great.
And the band name was Delta.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we started working on this song in Michael's studio. He had a grand piano, and we were moving parts around. And everything was nice. It was really fun, actually. And when Michael was working on the song, and we're working on talking about the lyrics and the melody and blah, 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 Michael is, singing, quietly. Like, that's great. And finally we get to a point where, this is starting to look like we have something solid here. This might be worth, hearing the way it's really going to sound. And I was probably standing, let's say, midway down the grand piano, from the front. He was playing and singing, and I was, we were trading ideas, so I was fairly close to him, but not that close, maybe midway down the piano, the grand piano, and he decides he's going to sing this song the way, it's meant to be sung. And I've never forgotten it. The guy sang the song, and it was so loud, his voice was so powerful, I had to move.
Yes.
It was unbelievable. And I think it was the first time I realized in my life, I don't have that strong of a voice. So I always think, I just have to get closer to the mic, or somebody has to turn the microphone up or something like that. And that's the way people do it. And I didn't realize that there were people who had a voice that strong.
Not many.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, no, his voice is just really, really loud.
Unbelievable power. Like, it's literally, you could not stand in front of him. It would hurt your ears.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing.
It was really, I love that.
Wow.
So great.
Well, talking about you, we'll interject a little bit here before we move on to the other things that you've done, but songwriting, so we are going to definitely touch base on that, because I just found out like yesterday that you've been writing songs for yourself and recording them, and you've got some great songs, and you did great on the vocals too. And I know you'll refuse that, but I like your voice. I think it's very unique and it's very cool. And one of the songs in particular that you wrote is actually a prog song, and I loved it. And there was another tune there that you wrote that was beautiful too. So just kind of setting that up so that I'm going to put some of that in this podcast when I put this thing together. So, but I digress. So let's
no.
move on to.
I just want to say about the prog song, because it's funny, because it was an exercise to me in how can I make a song that's really excessive and has a lot of parts, and make it work in a mix, which is funny because I always, that's something you do for your business, but for me, mixing is really hard, and when it's
but you're so into sounds and everything. You are very good. What I heard on headphones that I'm not used to, I don't know. I thought it sounded fantastic.
Oh well, thank you so much. Because I don't know if I even would have played that to you. Somebody else played it for you. I might have been embarrassed.
I'm glad that they did.
I wonder if you ever loved me. I wonder why I ever stayed. This prison you've built up around us, this prison is dark and afraid. Ring the bells and raise the gate. I am finally free. Now at last your kingdom comes. You stand alone. Your battle your love you destroy. Take my hand one more time before I let you go. Now at last your kingdom comes. You stand alone, thy will be done. Or do you take what have you won? Just your deepest fears and your rain of ring the bells and raise the gate. I am finally free. Now at last your kingdom comes. You stand alone, your battle's won. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to run, and your sentence just begun. Face the endless years of your reign of
Anyway,
I'm
so
impressed.
okay, where were we on the?
So you're in Delta. You're in this band. You know, you guys are writing songs. So what ended up happening with that record? Because I don't even know, and I worked on that record.
No, because it was sad because it didn't really do anything. I
It
suppose
did come out, yeah.
It came out, and I suppose if there were no hits on it. So I mean, if you're a new band and you don't have a hit, I guess nobody knows who you are.
Yeah, I think that was the one and only Delta record.
Yeah, and we never toured or did anything with it. So in the meantime, Michael needed a keyboard player.
Yeah.
So he asked me if I'd tour with him, which I was all too happy to do, of course. And that was fun. And then I wound up working on some of his records, too.
Yeah, you worked on No Looking Back with me.
Yeah.
And that was fun. And that's where I really got to know you and got to learn, about your programming skills and everything. And because I was trying to learn that stuff too, because I was working for Michael, and when you weren't there,
you were
I had
with Tom, right? Tom, the engineer who started the record.
Tom, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Tom Perry started.
That's right.
Yes, who I was his assistant.
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. Okay, now I remember. It's weird how we forget these things, but yes.
And then I don't know if Tom got busy doing other things, but I remember this for sure. Michael and all really liked you and thought you were younger and kind of go-getter and into it. And
I was trying to break into the business.
Yeah, you were just like me at that point, and we got on really well. And I remember we were going, let's give Ross a chance because he seems like he really is into it.
Yeah, I was totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I learned. You taught me how to do programming on DX7s, and you helped me learn the QX1, which was a really horrible sequencer.
Yeah, but the
you
one
showed
we
me a
used
lot
with
of stuff.
Henley. That's how I learned that one.
You showed me a lot of stuff, and then you ended up getting me some gigs with doing sampling and stuff for Yamaha, which was cool at that time. That's how we kind of got together. And
I was so happy you were available to do that, because some of the other engineers didn't quite get it. Yeah, but there you go.
It was really fun. Then you worked with Michael for quite a while. I don't remember how long, but you were one of the keyboard players. We had actually 3 keyboard players in the Michael McDonald band. It was obviously Michael playing the main keyboard parts. And then it was Chuck Sabatino, who was singing and playing.
So awesome. He was so great.
Playing mostly the organ parts, the B3 kind of parts.
Yeah.
And then you were playing all the like string and horn parts and stuff, and all the little bells and ding-dings and all that stuff.
Totally right.
Yes, it was a lot of keyboards in that band.
There were, and you know what? One of the most fun things about that gig was, for me, and another part of the education was that Vince. A lot of times I would double Vince. So Vince was the saxophone player, and then we had sampled horns, of course. And that was when I started to realize that sampled horns by themselves are pretty obviously sampled horns, at least to those of us who are musicians. But when you have at least one other real instrument, to blend in or put up in front, it really helped make it more realistic, And I loved working with Vince too, because he was just so great, and it was a challenge to be tight with him and do all those things in unison.
Yeah, Vince Denham,
awesome,
awesome player, great player, great sax player. Played the tenor.
Yeah. And everybody in that band was great. Remember David Pack was in it?
Yeah, David Pack was in it, and who eventually left the band, and then Bernie Charavelli took over as the guitar player. So you worked with Michael, and then during that, is that when you started working with Stevie?
No. So all this time when I'm doing all these things with the different people, they don't tour all the time.
Right.
I mean, and Michael would especially go out and do a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there.
Yes.
So at the same time, I'm always continuing working for programming for companies. I mean, I did stuff for EMU and Yamaha and, Audio, whoever. And also doing little tours with Boz. If it would work that I had a hole, I would fill it with whatever I could do.
Right.
Just like every musician.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
So sessions, whatever there was, And I think what happened next was I got offered to go back with Don. End of the Innocence is coming out. And that was so I kind of differentiate between tours. There are big tours where somebody has a big album, you know what I mean? And then you're going to be busy for the next year or more. You can pretty much plan on that's going to be your main event. And then people like Boz and like Michael tended to do smaller things.
Yeah.
A month here, a couple weeks here, whatever.
Right.
So I've been doing a lot of that with Michael, and Michael would have me over. We'd work on writing and stuff, and I worked on some of his stuff. You and I spent a lot of time in, Thousand Oaks or something up there?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And I really didn't want to leave Michael, but the Dawn tour was a big tour. It was going to be, last a long time, a lot of money. So I made the choice to do that. I kind of hated to do that because I really loved the whole family of Michael's.
It's never easy when you're happy with a situation, but they're just not working enough. And somebody else offers you something that's a lot more work or a lot more money, and financially you just have to do it. Yeah, you do, but you don't like to do it because I always feel that there's a real loyalty issue. Like I always felt like Michael was loyal to me, and I didn't like, this is always a problem being a freelancer. It's always a problem, but that particular case really bothered me more than others because I really did love that. I felt like that was a family. I really loved absolutely was. It was a wonderful. Yeah. It was a magical time. Really.
Yeah, it really was. I had a blast with those guys, and it was great. But I also knew all the people in Don's band, and it had always felt some allegiance to them as well. And there you go. So I made my choice. I took that tour. again, a big deal and a lot of fun. I mean, we wound up, Bruce Hornsby always come out and I get to play with him and work with him. And we did the Grammys. And I remember being like, I tell people I had to play, most people don't know this, but bass parts, if you flub a keyboard part or you flub a guitar part sometimes, especially if you're just in the background, you can recover a lot of times. You can act like that worked and you can make it work. But if you flub a bass part, that's not so very easy.
It's
hard to
very
disguise.
noticeable. Yes.
Hard to disguise.
Yeah.
So we went up and did Into the Innocents, I remember, at the Grammys. And, I had the bass part. Had the bass part. I was playing the bass part. It was a synth bass part.
Ah.
And pad. And, Hornsby was playing the piano. And it was just great. And I'll never forget, we started and I looked out. And in the front, Sting, Springsteen, every single person and in the back of your head, you're playing for millions of people.
Right.
I remember being so nervous, my fingers started to get wet. And I was like, it's in a flat key. I know I'm going to slip off one of these keys. But somehow I made it through.
So you didn't flub it?
I did not flub.
Ah.
But I remember being petrified at one point and going, you got to get it together and just play. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, that is a hell of a lot of pressure. Eh? The millions and millions of people that are watching it. Plus, you have all those people that are major artists. They're right in the front row. Yeah.
So many people you admire, and you look up and you go, oh my God, this isn't helping. Don't look up.
Yeah. Wow.
Just play the part.
Humbling experience.
Get into the music, will you?
Yeah.
But it was still, how often do you get that experience?
Yeah.
You got to go play at the Grammys, and it was, again, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. For some guy who grew up in some little town in Southern California, it's
yeah, well, yeah. But you worked for it. You deserved it. You did the work, and you made it to that point. So during this time, then, this must be when you got involved with Stevie Nicks.
So the thing about Stevie that was interesting was during the time I was working with Don had this whole project to save Walden Woods, which meant that we did a lot of benefits. And the benefits involved a lot of other big artists. It wasn't just Don. So Sting would come do it. And then we would do stuff with Sting. And we were the background band. So the gig was like heaven. Like, we literally would be doing things with Glenn Frey, then Jimmy Buffett, and Bob Seger. And we would be the band. And I'd get to learn all these amazing songs. Roger Waters. That was so much fun playing with Roger Waters. Roger Waters was so awesome. We had one song where he wanted a gliss on the organ, like, where, you just put your hands on the keyboard. Right. So I do that. And we go up and he goes, stops. Can you make the gliss bigger? Okay, well, I have long arms. So, I throw my arms on and I do the gliss and it's big. He goes, yeah, that's a lot better. Can you make it even bigger? I go, what? I'm thinking, what can I do? So I literally sit on the organ and use my butt and my arms, and it's the biggest gliss I ever heard,
Wow.
And we get done, and he goes, yes.
Wow.
It was so fun. So it was always stuff like that, doing Creedence Clearwater stuff, just Fogerty. It was everybody. It was the best gig ever. And one of the people we worked with was Stevie Nicks. Mm-hmm. So I kind of got to know Stevie early on, and she always, if you were in Don's band, that was another great thing. You got respect just because you were in Don's band.
Absolutely, yeah.
Everybody knew he was a stickler, and if you hung in there, you must be pretty good.
All these artists that you worked with too. I mean, Boz Scaggs, highly respected. Michael McDonald. I mean,
yes,
they're the best of the best.
They are, and all of the gigs had different challenges, and that was the fun of it. So Stevie already kind of knew me, and that was good. But what kind of changed everything was at some point towards the end of the 90s, Boz opened up for Stevie. And sometimes I'd be out there playing and I'd turn around and Stevie be, there getting ready for her gig, but she'd come down and would watch us. And she was sitting right behind me and she'd smile because we knew each other and it was fun. And, you know, I always liked her because she was just funny and she's great. At some point, I think that Brett, who was one of the keyboard players, was Stevie. So, of course, we knew everybody because we were touring with them. We knew those guys. And I forget how I'd known Brett earlier. But he was unable to do the Millennium gig, which she was doing in Las Vegas. And I think because he was with Chris.
Chris Isaak.
Yes.
Oh.
So Stevie and Karen and all the people, so I knew all the people in that entourage, of course, thought of me because they'd just seen me doing this tour with, you know, Boz opening for them. They go, well, maybe Scott can do the organ parts because he's, you know, I'm doing all those parts. I think I was the only keyboard player with Boz at that time. Usually we had 2 keyboard players, but at that particular tour, because we were an opening act, I was handling both keyboard parts and doing the best I could. But, you know, they called me and asked me if I could fill in for Brett. And, you know, of course I said, yeah, I was really wild about that idea. So, you know, I learned all the parts and I did it. And when the show was all over, they asked, this is kind of weird, actually. They said, well, hey, you know, how did you feel about doing that? And I said, oh, that was great. You know, I loved it. And if either Brett or the other keyboard player can't do it, the piano player, I'd be happy to sub for him. And I remember Karen going, you could do the piano parts? And I said, well, yeah, sure, I think so. I mean, I've been touring with you guys quite a while now, and I mean, I hear the show, and I feel like I'm comfortable. I could do that. So when the next tour started, they called me to play the piano parts, which was like, what? Because, you know, I wasn't trying to take anybody's gig. I didn't know that they were unhappy, you know. Or maybe he couldn't do it. I don't know what the story was. But in any case, I came in to do the piano. And then it became a point of, you know, if I wasn't able to do the piano because I was out with Boz or doing something with Don, they'd sub for me. But then whichever keyboard part needed to be done the next time, they'd call me because they knew I could do either part. You know?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And that's when I kind of got into this weird thing. It was strange. One night they kind of went, I remember it was like a private show or something. They said, hey, before Rhiannon, just ad-lib some stuff on the piano. Like, I just had to ad-lib a piano thing. Like, why? And it became a thing to do this intro to Rhiannon. And I would try to do slightly different things all the time. And it became like a big challenge for me to do this, but also kind of nerve-wracking. I'm not used to doing solo piano in front of that many people. And, you know, you go, I got to keep it interesting enough that they're listening, you know, and it was... So that was a real challenge for me on that gig. And I always used to, you know, take it that way, you know, and try and one-up myself but not, you know, not flub too badly.
I doubt that you're harder on yourself than you should be.
Yeah, but I mean, you also, I think, as a player, you run into this situation where you want to challenge yourself. And if you challenge yourself, you're more likely to make a mistake.
True.
So there was always that balancing act for me of, am I going to really be able to pull this off? Or is this, you know, maybe I shouldn't have tried this, you know? But it was a great challenge. And she was always so funny. I remember one time she was telling me a story about somebody accusing her of being a diva or something, you know? And she was so funny. She goes, you're darn right I'm a diva, you know? I gave up everything for this job, you know? I gave up kids. I gave up, you know, a regular home life, everything.
True.
Yeah, I know. I thought this was a great answer. She goes, by God, yes, I expect some...
Well, you know, I'm glad to hear from you, who worked with her, you know, closely, that she's a great person. Because I love Stevie Nicks' music, and I like her voice, and I like her songs and everything. And I'm a big Fleetwood Mac fan. And I always like to hear when somebody that I admire musically turns out to be a cool person too.
I really liked her. She was, you know, I guess you don't know what to expect, but she was always like really practical. I mean, I thought, when we would talk about normal things, she had practical advice for younger artists. She was really, really good about that. And I think right now, I think she may be more popular than ever. And I think it's partially because the women artists today admire her so much for kind of, being a trailblazer,
Yeah, she was.
And you know what? And she's really supportive of other women, and has good advice for them. But she's also, the part I really didn't see coming is she's funny. She can be self-deprecating, and she just can say witty, cutting, but just the way the rest of us are, funny, sarcastic things, that I didn't really know what to expect, but maybe I guess I didn't expect that. But I always really liked her, and I really enjoyed talking to her, and yeah, I miss her. I'm always happy when I get to see her. She, like I say, she's so popular now. Sometimes even when I see her, I go back and I have a minute to say hello, but I don't get to, sit around like I did when I was in the band.
Right, because you guys have time to kill and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and sit around and really just yuck it up and have fun,
Yeah. But so Stevie Nicks, and then was there any other things that happened then between then and when you hooked up with Chris Isaak?
Well, yeah, of course, the story dovetails completely. So Brett, like I said, Brett Tuggle was the other keyboardist often for Stevie. And even was, up until recently, was doing Fleetwood Mac. He's been with them a long time. Uh-huh. It came to pass that Brett, what happened there? Brett may have been with Lindsey Buckingham. And it was either Lindsey or no, it couldn't have been Stevie. It must have been Lindsey. No, he was with Fleetwood Mac. What's wrong with me? He was with Fleetwood Mac. I was supposed to also do Fleetwood Mac. But we ran into a schedule issue because they didn't ever plan months in advance. And it was kind of a 2-week, we need you in a couple of weeks to start rehearsals. And I was like, I'm not available in a couple of weeks. I was doing other things, but I will be available in a month. I'll learn the songs. They had like months of rehearsal time. I go, it's not a problem. And then to compound the issue, it was sort of like the new record didn't have a lot of keyboards. So it didn't work that I could get in the first part of it. So I went and did the other thing I was doing. And then in that time, they decided anyway, they didn't even really need another keyboard player. So I lost that gig, which was sort of sad to me, but I wasn't really heartbroken. I had other work, and, I didn't want to go up and do a keyboard gig where I had very little to do. That didn't,
right,
that's boring.
You want to be challenged.
Yeah, I want to have a little bit of a challenge. So I was sad that I missed the gig, but I wasn't, I wasn't too heartbroken, and it was his gig first, so that's the way it goes. So fast forward, to the summer, and oops, Chris Isaak needs a keyboard player now because Brett is out with Fleetwood Mac. So Brett says, well, why don't you get Scott? Because he was supposed to do Fleetwood Mac and he can't, so he's looking for a keyboard gig. And Cheryl Lewis, who's Chris's manager, also knew me really well because, she's in the same management group and we've known each other since Henley,
Yeah.
So this is a funny story. So apparently when the original guitar player in Chris's band was unable to do it, they needed a guitar player, so they came down to L.A., and they went through days and days of, all kinds of auditions with guys who were, the best guys in town. And, Chris's gig is it's a little quirky.
It is, yeah. And that chair is a very different chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so all these guys came, but none of them were really working, basically. I mean, there were some exceptions, but there was no clear-cut guy. It was like, oh, there he is. He's the guy,
Right.
And they were really distressed because all these people had been recommendations of management and stuff, and now they were kind of like, well, shoot, man, you gave us all these recommendations. They eventually wound up going back up to San Francisco, and they found Herschel there. None of the L.A. guys got the gig. So now, here we are years later, and they need somebody for the keyboard chair. And they'd also done a lot of keyboard auditions, you know, and that hadn't worked out. And Cheryl goes, well, you know, Brett and I both think Scott's the guy to do the gig. But they kept running up closer and closer to gig time. And I was like, well, I don't care whether you take me or not, but I'm running out of time to get cases made and things that I need to have done if we're going to do this. And I'm not buying the cases, clearly, if we're not going to do the tour, you know, for my Hammond and stuff. Because, you know, it was all this work needed to be done. And so she goes, we're just going to commit and say you're in the band. Okay. But I haven't come and played with them yet. And
so Chris didn't know you.
Nobody knew me. Nobody. I didn't know any of them. I mean, they briefly opened for Henley at one point in like the 90s, and we met each other, but that's it. You know, we don't know each other. And and this is 2003 now. So I come in, and I didn't know this, but a few of them were almost dead set against me. Like, you know, were mad that this deal had been made, and I don't blame them, without their consent or input, you know? And they were afraid that I wasn't going to be working out, you know what I mean? And then they were going to be stuck with somebody who wasn't appropriate for the gig. And so it's funny in retrospect, because I thought they were really welcoming and nice. And I felt, you know, like I told Cheryl, I would have never consented, or I would have never acted with confidence. Okay, I think I'm going to be fine for this gig. I think this is going to be a fun gig for me, if I didn't believe it. But on the other hand, of course, why should they believe it? You know?
Right, of course. Yeah, it's unknown. Yeah.
Yeah. So it had a happy ending. So Chris tells the story all the time too. And he goes, after we got done in, you know, the first hour and a half or something and took a break, we were all like, thumbs up.
Oh, okay. So you were accepted quickly.
So this guy did his homework.
You were accepted in the first day then.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
okay.
Because I'm a pro, like as you know, and I didn't walk in not knowing.
Of course.
I had all the sounds, and you know, I might be flubbing this song because I had to learn so many of them. Go, what happens here? Okay. Oh yeah, this thing, you know, that, you know. But then the next time it was right, and you know, after the guys started to feel, okay, he knows the songs, he's comfortable, and you know, I played enough rock gigs. I've learned a lot in the 15 years. I'm a much more appropriate keyboard player now than I was then. But even then, I knew enough rock, you know, old rock and roll kind of playing and stuff, because I'd done some of that kind of stuff with Boz, that I knew, you know, enough to flub my way through it, enough that it didn't sound like I didn't know the style. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, because it's definitely a style. To this band, yeah.
Yeah, I had the experience with Boz, a keyboard player who I totally admire, is an awesome keyboard player, was supposed to take my place because I wasn't able to do this tour because I had other work. But Boz asked me to come, you know, help him through the rehearsals. And this guy is an insanely better player than I am when it comes to like jazzy stuff and stuff like that. In fact, I'm a huge admirer of his. And I would make him show me things. Like
who is this?
Tom Coster.
Oh yeah, Tom Coster. Yeah. He's from Santana.
Yeah, he's exactly.
Yeah.
But he also does jazz. He's just a fabulous player, period.
Yeah.
And he would show me stuff on the organ and we would have a great time. But for some reason, I don't know why, it was never a thing of his to play old rock and roll blues kind of piano, which Boz does. He does kind of a lot of sometimes. And so there's a lot of this left hand do you know, kind of style, you know, Jerry Lee Lewis-y kind of stuff. And we got to one of the tunes and Boz wanted it, and he asked me, because, you know, something's going wrong with that song. And I said, and Tom watched me play it. And he goes, what are you playing with your left hand? And I was like, oh no, because this is just basic rock and roll. But if you don't play it, you know, if that's not just simple for you, you can't do the crazy stuff in your right hand because you aren't even thinking about your left hand anymore. You know what I mean? And so that became an issue. But there again, it's, you and I have talked about this before. It's not necessarily that you're the best player. That's not important. What's important is you're the best player for that gig.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't matter if you can't, if this guy can play licks that will bury you, if that's not what's called for in this gig, but what is called for is that you can play a little rock and roll, and you can play a little, rock and roll piano, and you can play a kind of, Ben Montench kind of organ, and you can play this and that kind of style, or simultaneously play the organ with one hand and the piano with the other. Some guy who can, bury you just on the organ, but he's like a fish out of water when you ask him to play that,
Yeah, right.
You're the right guy for the gig. And that's more important, That's the most important thing.
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, of course. You can't have some guy playing some different style that doesn't fit into the band. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, don't be discouraged if you see some guy, whipping around some stuff on the piano or just on the organ or whatever they do. Admire the hell out of them like the rest of us and be jealous, but realize that doesn't mean that you aren't going to be able to work. Most of these things are not that kind of work. They are the thing that makes you important is, I can program those sounds. I do know how to make this sound like the record. I can, if I have to, play a left-hand piano part with my right hand while I'm slurring some organ part with my left hand, which is backwards. But if you can process it, and can do it, you really, put yourself in an excellent position,
Right.
You're like a multi-keyboardist up there,
Yeah.
And a lot of guys who don't have to do it, of course, they could do it too if they wanted to.
Yeah, because like in Chris's band, we could, instead of having you doing both the Hammond and the piano parts or synth parts, you could have two separate guys. One guy playing the Hammond, and one guy doing the other stuff.
Exactly right, and the key to doing it is a lot. Some of these things are tricks. Well, organ players do glisses and stuff. Okay, I'm playing the organ with my left hand, but if I occasionally do a gliss and do the kinds of things I would normally do with my right hand underneath, the listener buys it. It sounds like two different guys are playing. Somebody's playing the piano and the other guy's playing the organ. He's not just playing, chords and sitting there. He's doing idiomatic things that an organ player would do with his right hand. And that's the kind of stuff I try to do to make it sound like there are two players actually playing like two guys with their right hand. You know what I mean?
You do it well. Yeah. It's excellent.
But I've done it for years,
And so now, since you got in with Chris, now you've been with him for like 14 years or so, right?
Yeah, I'm one of the new guys.
Yeah, you and Herschel. You both joined the band.
No, me and Raphael. Herschel's been with him actually for 20-something years.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I thought,
25 maybe.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
Kenny and Rowley, 35. Herschel, 25. 14 for
you and Raphael.
Yeah.
He's the percussionist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. And, so, wow. The band is totally together after all this time. Yeah.
It is, and it's a great group of guys. We really kind of are like a family. And, even Chris was saying this the other day. We went out to dinner and he was saying, one of the things that's kind of cool is we disagree. I mean, there's a lot of disagreement in the band about things. It isn't like we're some homogenous group, but we all respect each other, and even in our disagreements, even if people get mad the next day, it's like, it's the next day. You know what I mean? And,
right.
And even the disagreements don't happen that often, but it's really a great group of people. I really enjoy hanging out with them, and if I didn't, I wouldn't do this.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't be worth it if it was unpleasant.
Yeah. Well, no, it is a great camp. I mean, I've been real happy that you got me into this situation because it's fun for me too, and I enjoy the music. And Chris is an amazing entertainer, just funny, and it's great music. He's a phenomenal singer. He's another one of those guys like a Michael McDonald that's just got an amazing voice.
Does an amazing voice. I mean, I think you've set a lot of good tone for the crew as well. I mean, the crew and the band, especially whenever you're on a tour bus, with a group of people, it's important that you don't have people stirring up trouble, and you're just so not that kind of guy. That was one of the reasons I recommended you. It's great to have guys who are pros and calm and,
Well, I don't understand being in conflict with people. It just doesn't compute with me. It's like, yeah, we're all out here. We should all be happy. We're all working.
Yeah, we're all working, doing something we love.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's there to complain about?
There's nothing to complain about, but that doesn't stop people.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, so any other insights or stories you want to share with the millions of people that are going to be listening to us talk?
No, I'm sure I've talked their ear off at this point.
It's been fantastic. It's been just great. Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful interview and great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah, it's really good.
Well, thank you, Ross. I mean, as you say, we go back a long way, and I was happy to recommend you for the gig so we could work together again.
And here we are.
Yeah.
And finally, after actually like 7 months or so,
it's true.
It started out as a conversation on the phone about you doing this, and I'm glad that actually it took this long because I know a little bit more about what I'm doing here to do this.
Yeah, you've settled into part of this entourage, and it's
and doing the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, that's true.
I had no experience when I called you. I had no experience, and now this if I can get this done in the next few days, this will be the I think 27th interview I've done.
Well, congratulations! Yeah. Wow, good for you.
Yeah,
it's a cool project, really.
It's a fun project. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, great.
Glad to have you as part of it. So, Scott Plunkett, we're going to say goodbye to everybody and thank you again for being here.
I've been drinking here all evening, and there's a late moon coming up over the rise. Feels so lonesome, baby, like that lost look in your eyes. Now it's 2:30, and God, what I'm going through, remembering you.
We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage podcasts so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one that you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me at rosspallone@me.com. Thank you for listening.